Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may happen to be, and whether you're watching live or archived. And welcome to another in the Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday webinar series. This is number 23, I think, and we're going to have a little bit of fun. I've got a couple of good, excellent people, smart people, smarter than me, but that's not hard to do. So we've got Cindy Cavell from Cavell and Mertz. Cindy, welcome. Thanks for coming along.
Whoops.
And we've got the other half of the team, Mr. Garrison, Gary Cavell. Gary, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay for an old guy.
Oh, there you go. That's what are this? What was it? I was telling a story yesterday, but our Harry, the guy that does a lot of our driving for us, says any day I can get out of bed in the morning is a good day.
Yeah, if it's not too noisy, you know. Everything's cracking and making noise, and it's like, oh man, who's this old guy? Oh, it's me.
You know, it didn't used to be that I came with sound effects.
I know.
So before we get started, we're going to do the mandatory housekeeping stuff. Jeff Wilson, our Quincy, our West Coast sales guy, caught the Harry O reference, so shout out to Jeff there. This is meant to be interactive. If anybody in the audience has a question for Cindy or Gary, or want to throw slurs or arrows at me, absolutely feel free to type it into the little question window. If it isn't too offensive, I might even ask it out loud. If you hit the little hand wavy icon in your control panel, I've even been known to open the microphone a lot. Better have you guys doing the talking than me doing the talking some days. So we're going to have a lot of fun. We got the mandatory slide that I've had up for the last, Ed, is this 23 of these?
Yeah, I think we're at 23 exactly, Jeff.
There you go. So that's Mr. Disembodied Voice himself, Edward Sylvester. Ed is the guy behind the scenes that makes all this stuff happen and look like it's fairly easy. All I have to do is sit up here and blather on, and I'm pretty good at that. So each to our strengths. On that note, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. By the way, anybody who hasn't caught on before, we have a little contest going. If you can guess who Ed's using for his ID picture today, and the only real requirement is it's not Ed, then first person to guess it and type it into the questions window will win a swag kit. So there's my thoughts on ideas of how to discuss. Of course, the conversation will go wherever it happens to go. And I'm going to start real quick. Cindy, your background is journalism. Yeah, was that correct?
That's right. I got into radio first. As a teenager, my high school had a 100-watt radio station. And I was a sciencey kid because my dad was an engineer. And so the guy who was the physics instructor was also the faculty advisor for the radio station. And he took the physics kids in and showed them how to take the little Gates 100-watt transmitter apart as part of a physics class one day. That, and I just was madly in love with the kid who was the record librarian at the station. I was also one of the few kids, it appeared, outside of the kids in the music department who knew what classical music was. So I spent an hour every day spinning classical records.
Very cool. And then you moved from that into TV.
I was hooked after I did a summer internship at one of the Kansas City TV stations when I was still in college.
And since then, we'll talk about some of your travels and trials as well. And Gary, you've, I mean, I don't remember exactly how long you've been in radio, but somebody told me once Marconi had to shove you out of the way to get to his set.
That's true. Exactly true. Yeah, he was ill-tempered, as most old consulting engineers were, and perhaps still are. We're all pains in the butt.
You're, and Cindy, I didn't ask you this when we were talking the other day, but Gary, you're originally from New Orleans area.
That's correct.
Cindy, you too?
I'm a Midwesterner.
Oh, which part?
I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, and grew up in the Chicago suburbs.
Oh, there you even said Missouri, right? I know that there are a few people in the audience that are just nodding their heads and going, yeah. Let's see. So now one of the things I had you guys send me a bunch of photos on this because this is it's I mean obviously I know who you are, and Gary and I have known each other
Way too long.
going back to that American radio 25 kilowatt AM about almost 30 years ago.
Yep,
The WUST, is that right?
that's correct. Yep.
Well, there you go. Okay, so I haven't lost all the brain cells just yet. But so as sort of background for this, you all sent me a whole bunch of photos, and I kind of picked and chose and looked and said, wow, there's got to be a story to this one. So the first one I saw I said that was this one. And Cindy, I'm guessing that's a younger version of you, but what is the situation here?
We were, it was 1982. We were on a President Reagan trip to Brazil, and that's what's left of the press plane.
Ouch.
Yeah, he made a couple of critical pilot errors, and we hit the concrete ILS tower on takeoff, and spent some time circling to burn off some gas, and used the entirety of a 10,000 foot runway, and as you can see, then some, to stop the airplane. He's a victim of poor density altitude management.
No.
And there were only 48 of us on the plane. That's a 707, by the way. And the rest of the airplane up topside was taken up with our equipment that was doing the Brazil trip, and then the underside was all full of CNN's gear because they were getting off first. Because the plane was on its way to Washington D.C. with a stop in Atlanta. And since I was the pool technical manager on the trip, and the pool does work for all of the networks, I was the one who got to stay and count and weigh each of 500 pieces of equipment before it could leave the country. This is right before Christmas in 1982.
Wow. And let's see. So 82, I was well.
You're gonna depress her. Don't do it.
No. Just going to tiptoe right past that minefield. Now, so the big obvious question, was anybody hurt? I mean,
one or two minor injuries. Everybody else got off the plane fine. We had a busted elbow and a wrenched knee, but the rest of us were just, had ourselves rattled a little bit. But there's nothing quite like flying around for 90 minutes in a broken airplane.
yeah, that has got to be the understatement. So I had a story once. I guess I still have the story. So I had a situation once. We were in Panama, and I'd been up north in David, and coming back, and I might have the cities backwards because it's been a quarter of a century ago, but we were coming out of a little town called Chitre on the way to Panama City. And this little town, they had a runway, and I mean, we get on the plane and we're in one of those little row of seats down each side with an aisle in the middle and open to the cockpit, because back then nobody cared about stuff like that anyway. And there were 10 seats, 2 rows, so 20 seats, and I counted 27 people and a goat in the passenger area.
Okay then.
And the goat looked worried, and that was, your first clue, because he was probably the smartest one of the bunch. But anyway, so the pilots, we leave the terminal and they taxi down the runway, and they go all the way down the tarmac, and then they go all the way down the gravel, and then they go all the way down the grass at the tree line, and they turn it around at the tree line. And he's basically, I don't know enough about airplanes, but so my metaphor is he was standing on the brakes and he shoved the throttle to the stops. And when the thing started to jitter across the grass, he popped the brakes. Gary's sitting here because Gary, I know you're a pilot, so you have the actual technical words for what I'm trying to describe very poorly.
You have it nailed. It's perfect.
So this plane is the engines are screaming. I mean, they're running right at red line, and it starts to move, and it starts to move very slowly. And we use all the grass up, and then we use all the the gravel, and then we use all the tarmac, and we're starting to pick up a little speed. And I see the pilot and the co-pilot, and they're both up there gripped onto the yokes, and shoulders shaking. And we get to the end of the tarmac and we go down the gravel, and then we get onto the grass on the other end, and then it just comes up and they bring it up and we go up the side of this mountain, and I'm watching the tree tips. I swear I watched them clipping branches off of the with the wings. And we get to the top, the pilot looks at the co-pilot, they both cross themselves, and I never gotten on that particular airline again.
Yeah.
So
if you travel enough, you're going to have a story or two or three.
Well, my scariest one was here in Moncton, just about 2 hours north of here, landing sideways on an icy runway. It was a nice icy day with crosswinds, but yeah, it's definitely something that we do encounter a lot of. And Cindy, you've from the pictures you folks sent me, it looks like you've probably done a little more of the long distance stuff than Gary has.
Oh, hell yeah.
Gary spent a lot of time running around the country. I've spent a lot of time running around other countries.
Yep. Yeah.
This was my life.
What are we looking at here?
This was H.W. Bush's trip to Malta, where he met Gorbachev. And I'm sitting on a bunch of portable microwave cases. And that yellow thing is a transmission case. It's got video switchers and DAs and monitors and stuff in it. And the building you see to the right was our workspace on the 4th floor. And so it had to go in the building and up the staircase. No elevator. So I belong to ABC News's E&G division, and we spent a lot of time taking 150 cases of shit places where the native language is not English, and turning it into a transmission area and a TV studio. And we usually hooked up with a local satellite uplinker and sent it back to the States.
And having done a fair bit of overseas travel, it's amazing what you can accomplish with some creative sign language.
Correct.
And I'm noticing the arm pointing up there. And over to the right, that was Desert Storm, yeah, or something around that vintage. The right-hand picture.
Oh yeah, that is Desert Storm. ABC did the Schwarzkopf briefings. And so that's the Riyadh, that's the Sheraton, I think, in Riyadh, or the Hilton in Riyadh.
And that's Schwarzkopf to the left.
It's Schwarzkopf to the left. And the 2 uplink engineers beside him, and a cameraman, and the maintenance engineer, and me, and the audio girl, and the director, and the producer.
You've got to share the story about the incoming Scud missile. I think that's funny as hell.
Yeah, we did get pelted from time to time. And there was usually an air raid siren that would go off when they'd spot an incoming missile. And the closest one got about, I don't know, a block away from us. Everybody else in the hotel is heading for the basement. We're heading to the roof to turn the uplink on. Yeah, just television people are crazy, and into that control room to fire up the transmission system. And there was always a camera crew on the roof, and it rotated. We had a German ABC crew that was stationed in Germany, one that was stationed in France, one that was stationed in the US, and some other guys, I don't remember. But the French crew was on duty that night, and the air raid sirens go off, and the uplink guys and I head for the roof and turned up on the uplink, and I left them up there and went back to the control room. And all of a sudden there's this enormous explosion. But right before the enormous explosion, you could hear, we had a microphone and a speaker set up as an intercom up to the roof so that we could hear, they could talk to us. And all you used complete quiet, and you heard, "Oh shit," coming from the roof.
And then the boom.
Oh.
What
Oh,
was
okay.
that?
Is y'all okay up there? Oui, madame.
That with the accent, it's even better, I think. And I know when we were running through earlier, I made a comment or two about cable management on that bottom picture, but there tends to be a lot of stuff get moved in and out.
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned that, and that was one of the things we talked about. I mean, because you've got racks of stuff that goes in and out on a fairly regular basis, whereas radio, we tend not to have that as much.
Well, the problem in TV, and it's true in radio too, they're just more and larger cables and television. You do a lot of overbuilding because very few stations have the kind of cash flow that it takes to completely do a facility over again. And this particular one went digital in a couple of different phases. And when I got there, I figured out that phase one had not been documented. Also fairly standard fare for most broadcast facilities. And so I was literally pulling a wire to figure out what had turned off.
And keeping them on the air and not cheating them off too badly. And your job was to rewire the place. This was for a client on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think we've all done that. You know, you're trying to move anything out and move anything back in, or add anything, or do anything. And it's like, how do I do this
without
with the
destroying
minimum fuss, muss, and bother, or without, you know, as I was saying earlier, blowing a nice little divot into my side cutters because somebody put 120 volts on that quad foam cable. And this really comes back, and Mark Voris makes the comment, a lot of recon. And that's quite
Absolutely.
literally true. This is where documentation can save your ass.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I mean, I'm arguably one of the worst for it. I mean, I don't think my boss is listening, which is probably a good thing. But it comes to paperwork, not my strong suit. But the documentation, knowing what's connected where, is huge, both for your own peace of mind and for the sanity of whoever has to follow behind you.
I will say that some guys, and some are friends of mine, say, well, I'm going to keep it in my head, and if they ever get rid of me, they're up shit's creek, which is a technical term. And yeah, that there is that, but it's also not fair to the next person who could get hurt or killed, or, you know, I can see it both ways. I mean, you want to keep it secret so you have something to hold, but I don't think that ever is in the calculation for a firing decision. If they're mad with you or whatever, you're gone, no matter what you know. And
well,
not trying to preach or anything, but, you know, it's just, it's tough to document in the first place. And if you're kind of cheesed off, you're disinclined.
Well, more to the point. Oops, go say it, Cindy. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a teaching tool too. I mean, if you don't want to die in your chair, still in your office at the radio or television station, you better be teaching somebody else how to do it. And if you don't have the documentation, that's really hard to do.
Yeah. And that, I think, comes back to the big, and more to Gary's point, is trying to educate folks that doing the documentation is probably better job security, because you can take that binder full of stuff to the station manager or the GM or whoever and say, look, I've created this binder showing what goes where and how so number one, they know you're actually doing something. And number two, they know you care enough about the, I guess the future of the station to make sure that that there's a path for succession. You know, that's one of the things we talk about, you know, in our offices is what if so-and-so gets hit by a bus? Nobody should have all the knowledge on anything.
Exactly.
That'll start a fight at a bar with a bunch of beers about, you know, oh, screw them. I'm not going to document it. You know, it's good for Facebook flame war.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk
We
about
never see
Facebook
that.
momentarily. No, never, ever. Now,
Oh,
Gary, your turn. Yeah. So contrary to Cindy starting in radio, you actually were a TV sort of guy at one point in your career too.
yep. I spent time at a couple of TV stations and lived to tell of it. Learned, watched an expert from out of town destroy a $100,000 Klystron. That was kind of fun. Guy knew everything and was busy showing us, and he wasn't paying attention and blew a hole through the side of this thing, water everywhere. But yeah, television was fun, but radio kept calling me back. I'd done television in the Cajun part of Louisiana and also in New Orleans, and it was fun and interesting. And that's when we did remotes. When Cindy and I compare notes, she worked for some fancy stations, also a couple threadbare ones, and I always got the poor ones, the ones that had cameras that were hand-me-downs, and you were borrowing equipment from neighboring stations and begging for parts from them, and it built character. But television was fun back then because it was all wires and not as much. There wasn't anything digital. That's what it built character.
Well, I know Kirk Harnack's in the audience, and I know Kirk's sitting there going, but the flexibility of being able to patch this to this to this with a keyboard.
Yeah, well, you can just undo one cable and plug it in somewhere else. That's quite flexible.
Well, you can do the cable unplugging thing has a lot of utility, Jeff. In that little Cajun TV station, we had a very vain guy doing an exercise show in the morning, and he was giving the director a hard way to go. And he said, hang on, keep writing audio. And he moved a patch cord and did something with some sort of a tape. Basically, the guy saw something on the monitor that wasn't him doing push-ups all of a sudden, and he lost his composure, and patches got repulled and nobody knew what was going on. And this guy had to come apart. So we're just laughing and snickering. So leave it to your imagination what was on the screen, only on his monitor.
And that comes back to, I mean, I think we've all heard the stories about you'll get a radio host who's maybe a little full of themselves, and somebody slowly increases the delay in their headphones.
Bingo.
Well, that's fun.
So
never mess with the engineer. That's when I teach a class for the NAB management folks, and I give them a few stories about how we can get even. So don't mess with us. And lessons get learned by a couple of war stories.
Well, I mean, sure. My favorite was I had Sam Donaldson, because he was the White House reporter at ABC, spent a lot of time with us on these remotes. And Sam was famous for firing just about all his audio people. I put firing in quotes because none of us ever left. And we were in the middle of Seoul, South Korea, and he's having the come aparts. You're fired, you're fired. Sam, I'm holding your mic. Is that a good idea? Oh, well, never mind.
He would get mad and throw his toupee at people.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of characters in the business.
Yes. One of the other things you were mentioning earlier, and you alluded to it as a Cindy story, was kind of the work to rule of the camera crew for a director who was a little harder to work with. And well, a director says that's what you called it.
Cindy, you probably have the best stories for that. Just somebody who has a nasty SOB and.
No, I don't have. I have a funny story in that regard, but not a one of getbacks. the senior director for ABC News came from New York. He came from ABC Sports because he was a Roone Arledge choice when Arledge was running ABC Sports and then went to run ABC News. They started using a lot of sports cameramen in Washington to do the news, the big spectacular news events, which really made the Washington cameramen kind of mad. And it was Bush Sr.'s first Rose Garden speech. And they brought a sports truck down, dragged all that stuff out. Sports guys are, and the director is sitting there saying, "Shoot the bushes, shoot the bushes." They're in the Rose Garden. What do you think we got a picture of?
I'm going to guess a whole bunch of Secret Service guys.
No, we got a picture of the rose bushes.
Director says, "Okay, pal."
No, they
right.
didn't know. They didn't know.
Really? That wasn't director says. That was just following orders.
They didn't know. And immediately after that, the Washington guys went back on camera for those things because they knew.
It's funny. I did some work in television for the networks because being in New Orleans, there's a lot of entertainment things going on, a lot of sports things going on. So I had a crew of guys, and they would, the networks would buy us union cards temporarily, and we'd do work and then go back off. But it's amazing the culture of the on-the-road crews in radio and television and networks versus station crews. It's just a different life and a different set of demands and a different way of having to think. So it's kind of fun to spend times on both sides of the operation to do the live events. That's sort of why working on AMDAs is kind of fun, because it's like a live event. You know, something's going to go boom. You don't know what's going to happen. You hope it works out okay. You know.
And I know I've got a few friends that do like game day coordination for football teams, and just listening to their stories of on the road versus their stories of day-to-day engineering the stations. It's like you say, it's two totally different. I wouldn't say totally different lifestyles, but almost two totally different mindsets, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, at the station, you've got a lot more flexibility to follow routines, follow procedures, and build stuff in, like you said, Cindy, over-engineer stuff. But on the road, I think there's a lot more just get it done and sort the details out later. Is that be an accurate way of putting it? And I'm kind of guessing here because.
Yeah, no, Gary calls that the gonzo mentality. If you don't have time to do it right, you just gonzo it to get it on the air.
Yeah, you've got to do that. Cindy would tape transformers and wires to a mirror because you could untape them easily as opposed to ripping up a wall. They were always based in hotels. And you have one of those mirror transformers?
Isolation transformers.
Yep. So everybody shares on the road unless you just really cheese them off the night before at the bar. Everybody helps out, and it's the road life is a different sort of animal, and it's good for the younger folks. And as you get a little bit older, you're less flexible about things. You get crankier, so maybe you need to go back into stations.
One note about that picture that you've got up on the right hand side. That's Gary tuning up the WMAL, what used to be the WMAL system. They just imploded all four of their towers just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so I think I saw a video of that on Facebook because they dropped them in and all toward each other. It was
right.
Pretty interesting. So if anybody does follow, I know I saw it on the Broadcasting Club Facebook page. I probably saw it on the I Take Pictures of Transmitter Sites Facebook page. Probably saw it on both of those sites more than once. Because yeah, that'll happen. Now, Gary, you'd also mentioned earlier about doing sort of a school for management over like teach, and I think that's what that top left picture is, isn't it? Because I mean, you're looking at that bullet like you've never seen one before.
Well, I never have. No, the NAB asked us 1,000 years ago to help they have something called the Broadcast Leadership Training Program. And they teach managers and owners different things about and upcoming people, new like sales managers that want to get into ownership or higher management, or about radio and television, the stuff they don't know. Like there's a ton of things these guys have to absorb, ratings and copyrights and
all the legal
accounting.
things that surround owning.
And they take us in, and we provide several people for half a day and said, okay, engineering 101, everything you want to know about engineering in 3 or 4 hours. And they look on their faces first, oh shit. And then, but we keep it entertaining. And we have petting zoos like, okay, this, you got to go from the transmitter to the antenna with what? Something called a transmission line. We have several samples of big ass transmission line and tiny transmission line. And if somebody says, I have a problem with a bullet, depending on the neighborhood, it's probably one of these things. And I hold that up and I explain how they can fail. So it's teaching them the jargon. One of the big takeaways from my session is take your engineers to lunch. Don't be scared. It'll be okay. The more you earn an engineer's trust, the more they'll run through walls for you. It's more their station than yours. You may own it, but it's their baby, and they are intimate with all its innards and outers. They care more than you do. So cultivate the relationship. That's some of the stuff we try to do. And also give them the jargon. Like if we talk about bullet, this is a bullet, this is what it does. Not so much at their eyes spin, but just so they know what we do, the types of engineers out there, and why we're important. The other thing I encourage, which everybody on the session might cringe about, is ask to see the transmitter site. And that's actually a good test. If the engineer's eyes get very wide and there's this oh shit look on his face, that's probably a tail right there. Or if they, oh cool, that shows you're interested, and be interested. Go out there and see the stuff, see the spare parts, ask questions, try to understand. That way, when he calls you up at 3 in the morning, or she calls you up at 3 in the morning, the Framus broke, you've at least sort of seen a Framus once before, and you get a framework of what's going on. And that's the sort of thing NAB is having us do for, I guess, what, 20 something years, Cindy?
Yeah.
So it's been a while. We also teach their engineering apprenticeship program, and forgot what else, another engineering program just for newbies. So it's kind of interesting to talk to managers, and each class is different and each management group is different, but it's radio and TV people, and it can be fun. I think I only had one that was absolutely deadly. It's like, God, did we really bomb that badly? But
I think we've all done those ones. For what it's worth, Paul Tinkle is the president and owner of Thunderbolt Broadcasting out in Martin, Tennessee.
I know that critter.
You do, and Paul has gone around doing a tips for the engineering manager, and it's more stuff geared for manager. And take your engineer to lunch is actually one of Paul's tips. He, if you go back into our website, into the support, and you can find tips and tricks. And I grabbed Paul's presentation and condensed it into an article. Oh, probably a year ago now. It's I don't know, time's flown this year. I'm not exactly sure what's when anymore, but absolutely both teaching management to talk engineer. I go the other way. I do a whole course on teaching engineers to talk manager, things like ROI and bottom lines, and you know, because engineers, we speak watts and amps and volts and, you know, efficiency, and all that stuff's great. And we know that the most efficient transmitter is going to save you money on the power bill, but the manager doesn't know that. So when you tell him this is more efficient, all he hears is blah, blah, blah. I want you to spend $40,000.
Exactly.
If you tell him we're going to drop the power bill by $1,200 a month, that sinks in. So, you know,
it's learning what their triggers are and what they need. I mean, they might have a management over them that are beating them up because they're not making quota, or they have their own overriding royalty, where if they make a certain quota, they have more money in their pocket, and mama wants a new coat. So their motives are different from yours, and you don't know them. So you need to understand as best you can where they're coming from. And I had a manager that, a guy named Dick Oppenheimer, he's since passed, but he used to rule by terror, his words. He said, you can't do that anymore, but I ruled by terror. Everybody was afraid of him. I decided not to be. I said, Dick, here's how I'm going to tell you. This is the cheapest. Choice 2 is this is the most expensive. Choice 3 is what I recommend. It's your money. What do you want to do? He loved that. So you have to learn how to deal with your manager, your owner, and how to communicate in their terms, and then they start to get trust because they know you're not trying to spend money, you're trying to help them. You make the decision, manager, I won't. Here's my recommendation, but it's your toy, not mine. And if you can divorce the station from being yours and it's really his, that can help a relationship quite a bit. I think, Cindy, you've had a couple of screamers as managers and you've had to deal with them the same way.
Sure.
Call
I
them
mean,
screamers.
you have to learn them as people. You have to learn what motivates them, and you have to learn how to drop the jargon when you talk to them. I mean, because Jeff, you're exactly right. All they hear is blah, 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 money. And
Yep.
you know, and I have one GM, I used to walk into his office and he goes, all right, what do you want me to spend money on now?
And that's the bad
Mhm.
relationship. You have to fix it.
And that's where yeah, it's an education thing because it's I don't want you to spend money. I need you to invest in this
Yeah.
so we can save or whatever. And it's a lot of times you're saying the exact same things using different words. I'm
Sure.
going to unmute somebody in the audience. Kirk
Uh-oh.
Harnack is here. I see. If he's, I hope he's in front of his microphone. Because Kirk has experience from both ownership, engineering, manufacturing. He's been the customer, the guy on the other end of the mic. So Kirk, if you've got your mic in front of you, and I see it just turned green, I assumed it would, but how do you reconcile that? Because I know you work with, same as all of us, with owners, but you've also been in that position.
Yeah, well, this is a real sticky, or can be sticky, and you're right. It's the relationship. And look, most of us engineers, we're pretty smart. Sometimes we have a lot of emotion wrapped up, as was being said there, that we think the station's ours. We treat it like ours, and that's good. That you take it. You really want to take care of it. It's your baby, but you got to remember, it is actually not yours unless you're part owner. And I'm part owner of a bunch of stations, and as I've said many times, and Larry Fuss hates me for it, I own the part that doesn't make any money, which is why I work full time for Telos. But even though I'm part owner, I have a relationship with my business partner, Larry, who does hold the purse strings, and they're very short purse strings, to present it to him exactly like that. Like, not, hey, we got to spend this money, but look, here's the situation. We have this problem. We've been off the air 6 times this year because of X. Do you want to fix X? I've researched this and I found the cheapest way to fix X, and it makes the most sense, is to do Y, right? And most owners do respond positively to you having done your homework, you realizing the station's not yours, you realizing the money's not yours, but it is valuable. Treat it as if, spend it as if it was coming out of your pocket. And that generally results in that good relationship. So many engineers, hey, as smart as we are, sometimes our bedside manner isn't the best, or we may not dress the best part for corporate enterprise. And I think that we can do that. We can dress the part, act the part, and realize that this is the world that the owners and the CEOs and the managers live in, and we need to help them meet us at least halfway. And if that means putting a suit on or dressing nice or making sure you're in the what am I looking for, the department head meetings. You want to be in those department head meetings as a contributor to the success of the broadcast operation.
And don't look like an unmade bed when you go into those things. Be a professional. I mean, everybody thought I was the smartest engineer in New Orleans because I wore a suit. I didn't know squat, but I looked good. And and management respected me because I presented professionally. And I'm still carrying that, man. I don't know anything, but I look good. I can be professional as hell. And
What do they say? Fake it till you make it.
Bingo. And by the way, go ahead, Cindy.
The thing too is, I mean, a lot of times you go in as a fresh engineer into a station and everything's busted. You've got, everything's a train wreck. It's all about to go down in flames, and they've got enough money to take care of one thing. You have to be able to prioritize the projects. What's the most important thing to get done first with the money the station has that'll make the most impact?
And maybe share that discussion with the manager. Hey, I'm noticing several things wrong, and I think in prioritizing, this is what I'm seeing. Do you have a decision? By the way, you saw from in the middle there, I was actually manager of a radio station in New Orleans, and I owned a piece of a station in Altoona, Pennsylvania. And the hardest thing to do is to take my own advice when I was in those positions. Like, damn, this is going to cost me money. Wait, what am I saying? Mm-hmm. So it took off the engineer hat, put on the manager owner hat, and it really opened up my eyes to how engineering decisions can impact the other side. So again, it's probably worth another webinar, getting Kurt and Paul and everybody involved, but learning how to communicate with each other. It doesn't happen instantaneously, but it's building trust. And again, don't look like an unmade bed and don't smell like an old gym shoe. It's.
Hey, I got one more thing.
Yeah,
I got one more thing to add, if I could, before I hop back off. A lot of us used to know an engineer. I'm assuming he's retired. A guy named Chris Karb. Chris was in Memphis for a long time. He actually managed I want to say WHBQ in Memphis. And last I heard from him, he was in Asheville, North Carolina, nearing retirement a few years ago. Chris said, "Hey, I put on my engineer clothes. Excuse me. I put on my business clothes. Business casual. I look nice, but I keep a coverall in the car and at the transmitter side. If I need to get dirty, I'll just throw the coverall on. I look like the Maytag repairman, but that's okay. And I'll do my dirty work. I'll crawl under the transmitter, under the consoles, whatever I need to do. But when I'm not wearing that, I at least look business casual."
Yep. And one of the other things I'm always telling folks is that if you engineer for any station, I don't care whether it's radio, whether it's TV, whether it's commercial, non-commercial, it's almost part of your job description. One of your responsibilities should be to know what that station bills or underwrites down to the minute.
Yep.
Because if you know what the cost of the off-air time is, then you're halfway toward figuring out whether your solution is cost effective or not. But if you don't know what it costs to be off-air, you got no idea. You're just looking at shiny stuff.
And there's a way to sell that too. I think if you've done the calculus, this isn't really going to make a big difference, but it's a bee in your bonnet. Just go to the manager and say, "Hey, I'd like to do this for the station, but it's not going to do squat for you. This is what it will do for it. It's what it'll do for me. Does this make any sense to even talk about it?" And you'd be surprised. Some people might, if they're not, about to die from lack of cash flow, they might say, "Yeah, go ahead, do it." Or at least they'll know you're thinking about stuff. So there's a way to even do the bright and shinies, even if they can't be justified.
Right. And I mean, in our facility, even at the manufacturer level, we've got 3 levels of improvement because we've got this program called continuous improvement. Basically, all employees are empowered to do what it takes to get your job done more efficiently, more cost effectively, and safer. And those are the 3 primary criteria. There's more to it than that. But the basic gist of it is if you see an improvement that'll take less of a half an hour of time or cost less than $200, you just do it. You don't ask, you just do it. If you see, it might be something as simple as moving this bench from over here to over there so that you don't have to you can take 5 fewer steps in the process of getting something done. If you see something that requires a little more time or money, then you might go to your upper level manager. And if it's a major systemic change, then at that point we involve the whole quality review board for the facility. And I mean, it'll be different from one group to another, one station to another, but it's one of those where it's useful to talk to the manager and say, so at what point should I come to you for permission to improve something versus just doing it?
Usually it's how much leeway do I have for this and that's per month? Is it $500, whatever it is, and act like you're grateful for it and use it wisely. That's when, again, saying, "Hey, gee, can I go to the sales meetings? Can I go on a sales call with this guy? Can I sit in the staff meetings?" "Why? You're just an engineer." "Yeah, I'm just an engineer that cares and wants to know more about the station." That buys you credibility and you start to learn the other people's pain points and what's important. Then you start to become part of the team. You don't smell like an engineer anymore. You're treated more seriously.
And back on that point, coming to the staff meetings, if you don't know what's bothering the DJs, for example, and it might be something as foolish as this one box that they use all the time is way back there instead of right up here.
Mhm.
You know, it could be
It'll come out
something
in a
really
staff
easy to
meeting and
fix.
they won't tell you. You know, that's one of those things where you go to the general gripe sessions.
And I mean, that's one of them, you know, you sort of meet with the staff one-to-one every so often, you know, whether it's once a week, get together for a beer after work or whatever. I mean, Barry Michigan is, oh, here we go. Curtis Stefan, the more you know the more you know of an asset. Let's see. Oh, there you go. The more you know, the more of an asset you are, as opposed to just a pain in the ass. That's
I
a
like
good
that.
way of
That's
putting
exactly
it,
right.
Chris. I like that. And that's true. Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, our job is to ensure the facility runs reliably and efficiently. And the more you know about the overall operation, I mean, because we know where all the pieces go, but knowing how the people use them isn't necessarily the same thing. And I know there's been times where even one of our boxes, I've seen one go in, and then you'll be visiting them a little later and you'll see they've got something up on the screen of the computer and it's like, oh, you use it that way. I never thought of that. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's a good point. Flipping forward a little, well, I guess we've covered pretty much your entire work history here, right, from the beginning to the end, just in that one slide. But you still get out there and get your hands dirty on a regular basis. And I see you're playing with some hollow state technology here, glass fets.
That's a future. Yes. Nautel is starting a new line. It's going to be all tube state, and they're getting rid of all the solid state stuff.
So, and this particular site, so you and I have had several conversations about this. I'm not ashamed to say that we've had a box that has fried more than once and with glorious smoke and abandon.
Well, it's not your
Um,
fault.
well, and that's where we were coming to, because you had just recently figured out the ultimate cause of this. And it wasn't just this transmitter, it was several previous to it. So what was the situation there, just in very generic terms? We don't need to identify anybody in particular.
Well, for years it kept blowing up anybody's solid state transmitter to where they want to get a priest in, and they actually have a little gree thing on the wall, a little voodoo thing to try to ward off evil. But solid state wouldn't hang in there, no matter whose. And we were asked to get involved because of a change in ownership, and got a for real electrician and said, this place keeps blowing up even when there's no thunderstorms around, no lightning. Something's not right with the power. Do we crab at the power company or what? And he said, oh, your neutral and ground are tied together on this three-phase circuit, and that makes this very unstable. That's what that transmitter's hanging on. Voltages run all over the place and blow up your power supply. I said, yeah, that's what's happening. In fact, this
Yeah.
thing emitted smoke in front of one of your field techs, and he was most impressed by the volume and quality of the smoke. But you know, it had to do with the electrical wiring, which is not something the typical broadcast engineer does for a living and knows what they're looking at. You get in especially this guy was an industrial electrician, a commercial electrician, not the guy that works on a home. And three-phase power is a different animal, and there are ways to do it and ways to not. And the impact of a bad install can be long-lasting and mysterious. Well, the old tube type is single phase and it hangs in there, and scoffs at its little light buddy next door to it, but it's he's going to be put back to sleep soon because we have parts coming back in, and the electrician scheduled as soon as we get permits to fix it in the next week or two. But it's amazing. It's not always the box. It's not always lightning. It can be other things. So you need to look, why has this had a history of always blowing up and when?
So we had a situation here at the house not too many years ago. Seems like my house is a wonderful test bed for almost everything foolish that we see in the field. Well, they say the plumber's pipes get fixed last, but so I'm sitting in the house one day, and I was in the kitchen, and all of a sudden I look around and I had incandescent bulb. No, I didn't. I had LED bulbs, and one of them started flashing. And it's like, why is that flashing? And about the same time, the microwave made this gargly sound that I've never heard a microwave make before or since, thank goodness. And so I started looking, and I've still got some incandescence in various parts, and it seemed like some of the bulbs in the house were super, super bright, and some were really, really dim. And what had happened, went down, well, I grabbed the voltmeter first and started jabbing it into outlets, because that's what you always do, right? And discovered that half my outlets were 160 volts and half of them were 80 volts. And what had happened outside on the line coming in, a tree branch had rubbed through the neutral wire. So we had totally lost our neutral reference. Turned out there was no ground reference. That was fixed last year. That's a subject of a whole different video I do. But yeah, it's amazing how neutral and ground, although we're used to them being tied together at the entrance, still perform very different functions.
Depends on the circuit. Maybe you shouldn't tie them together, or there's a way to at a certain point in time. It's just, yeah, three-phase electrical is a different animal, and you need to pay attention to it. It'll bite you.
Mm-hmm. Now we're about halfway through the slide deck. Coincidentally, I've been talking a lot, and we've talked a whole lot about work stuff and work things, but you all do a lot of stuff for fun too. I mean, so Cindy, we commented on the various names for your equine buddy there. I'm still not sure that I don't think Alpo is my favorite, but like I said, my dogs both answer to shithead, so you know, there you go.
So does the horse.
And oh, Chuck Dubé's in the audience. Chuck's also a drummer. I think looking through the list, I know there's one or two guys in here that play the drums as well.
Yeah, I used to do that professionally in New Orleans. Is one of my, I did too many things all at once in New Orleans. I don't know how I ever slept, but yeah, those are Gretsch customs for the drummers in the group.
Now, I've been to New Orleans several times. I always thought sleep was optional.
Pretty much.
Up to a certain point. Now, you also fly, or do you still?
Yes, we own a Cessna 182, and that's me looking all serious in the left seat. And the one below that is I took something called upset recovery training. If the airplane decides to get ugly and you lose control, how do you fix it? And that's what that airplane's designed to do, stupid shit, and you learn how to fix it. So that was kind of an exciting, we did 2 or 3 days of training in that thing. So where the world gets ugly and upside down, you know what to do automatically. So it's worth doing if you can find the right kind of people to train you if you fly an airplane.
Right, just sort of building the muscle memory so you start doing the right things. And you know, speaking of doing the right things, and Cindy, I mean, I know you're pretty accomplished on the horse, but having grown up, and this is what I talked about, my sisters all owned horses. My horses were mostly contained under a gas tank and behind the handlebars. But every now and again, they'd need a helper to ride with them on a tail and trail or some trail ride, and I'd get sucked into it. And you kind of need to be prepared. Horses can do some unexpected stuff sometimes.
I've had a few body parts that have had to be repaired as a result.
Like a broken back, but she says, "Oh, no big deal." Yeah,
Well,
she's Iron Woman. What can I say?
No. If you ride horses for any protracted period, you will get injured. It's not if, it's when.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of those. The other thing I told somebody, the two things I've discovered as I get older is that I don't bounce near as well as I used to, and gravity works better.
Yes.
True. For the people in the listening group that have daughters, though, you should know that other than you're scared to death they're going to get trampled, run over, or flung, if your daughter is into horses, you don't have to worry about boys at all. That's where all the money and the attention will go.
Oh, it's the same if you've got sons, get them into cars early on.
Couldn't hear you, Cindy. Say again.
You also know where they are if they're at the barn.
Mm-hmm. And that was one of those, you sent me an email because we got talking, and I don't have any slides on it, but we got talking about cooking early, and Gary's very much the haute cuisine. Give me a recipe and I'll create, what was it? Trout almondine was one of the ones you'd mentioned, wasn't it, Cindy, or was that yours?
No, that's his. No, that's his.
Whoever shows up first with the stove wins. The other guy has to clean up, you know.
That's kind of the way it works here. And with us, we started with well, Gary and I, we first discovered this. You sent me your shrimp Creole recipe.
Yep.
And it did turn out really, really well, and that was cool. And where I was going with this, you both have much different styles. Because Cindy, you seem to be the more organized in the professional aspect. But you're very much the, I guess, free spirit in the kitchen, the one that just knows what goes with what. Would that be accurate, or am I just blowing smoke, which is also possible?
Oh. I guess yeah, I would. Gary wants things to be perfect. Gary knows that if he follows a recipe, that it'll come out the right way because he's an accomplished cook. I'm like, yeah, let's throw some of this in here and see what happens.
No mushroom cloud must be good. The dog didn't die. We're in good shape. You know, it's,
Yeah. Well,
yeah, it
and
comes out
it's funny
great.
because so I've got this app on both my phone and my personal laptop called Recipe Keeper, and I love it because I can take a recipe from a website and it gets rid of the 5 pages of the author's life history and just gives me the details that I need, the ingredients and the instructions. But the other thing that's awesome about it is it has a notes section, because I have not got a recipe that hasn't got penciled notes all over it where I substitute this or change that or tweak that. And now, having said that, your shrimp Creole recipe does not yet have any notes on it. I didn't see anything I'd change about that. But then again, you wrote it like an engineer, because you specified, do the prep work first, get this all together. Leader Gregory's mentioned true about horses, best hobby. Can't argue. I'd say I was always into motorcycles, but I liked hanging with the horses. Do you still ride, Cindy?
I still have the one in the picture. He's older and he's not in show condition anymore, but we still go out and ride. He still tries to fling me off.
That's it's a little bit of a workout for both of you. We had this one my mother had. Her official name was Leicester's Midnight Angel. Her colloquial name was something that I can't say on live broadcast. But that horse she knew the level of skill of anybody that got on her back, or she knew the level of arrogance of anybody that got on her back. And if you got on her and thought that you were going to ride this horse into the ground, this horse would very cheerfully put you on the ground. And she could, I've never seen anybody that could stay on her back if she decided they weren't going to.
Yeah, no,
So,
he's much the same. He's a former stallion and has a very finely tuned sense of justice.
Growing up on the farm, that's not uncommon to a lot of animals. We're hitting the top of the hour. One thing I did want to do was remark, you guys, I think probably in a first for NAB, shared its separate awards, but you both won the Engineering Achievement Award last year. Congratulations for that.
No, Jeff Welton won it last year. Congratulations, Jeff.
That's still this year, but thank you. But that's got to be a really kind of a big boost to have both of you up there at the same time. It must have been like cloud nine around your place for a little while.
It was pretty awesome. It's humbling. It was pretty awesome.
It's scary because at that point, where the bar is set. It's set really, really high.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
In my case, I figured they just lost sleep with their senses and wanted a package deal. So yeah.
And see, with me, I just kind of figure, I don't know, somebody had to throw a name in there somewhere that if nobody else gets nominated, you're bound to win sooner or later.
There you go. That's what I figured.
On the website, the Cavell Mertz website, and say I've worked with you guys off and on for several years, but I rarely hit this particular part of the website. And one of the things that Ed Bucant had mentioned last week during our webinar was you guys do drone services.
Yes, sir. We have a fleet of, I guess, 2 or 3 drones and a couple of pilots, and we do measurement of antenna patterns. We do inspection for RF hotspots. We have an IR camera that's affixed to one of the drones, and a guy who understands IR technology and what to look at, what's a reflection, what's really something about to catch fire. And it's another good tool for investigating an issue with an RF system, either the horizontal run on the ground or going up the tower. Elbows is usually where the scene of the crime, by the way. But it's one of the many tools that are becoming more and more possible for engineers to use. I will note for those who want to play with drones near towers, know that some of the telemetry and controls operate on the same band as some of the microwave transmitters.
The Wi-Fi.
Yep. And so sometimes a drone will go bye-bye, like out of control somewhere else, and there goes your investment. So always know your environment when you're using a drone and keep away from dishes that seem to be transmitting.
Very cool. William Harrison's asked a question, or no, little Joe. So what do you call a guy who hangs out with musicians? A drummer.
I kill you.
And so
Ooh,
Mark
yes.
Fortas is also a drummer. Chuck Dubé is a drummer. Many years ago, I played a set and recently done pipe band drumming. But Mark also mentions that guy wires can be a problem for drones too. No question about that, especially if
you do have to map the guy wires to know where you can fly and where you can't. There's a lot of pre-work that goes into droning a tower, whether you're merely looking at it with a camera, or you're using a measurement system on it, or you're using an IR system on it. The FAA has a lot of restrictions about where you can and can't fly. Towns and neighborhoods care a lot about where you do and do not fly. And there are guy wires. There are 6 gig dishes will kill your drone communications faster than anything in the universe, because drone communications are Wi-Fi, and typically they're at 5.8.
Mm-hmm.
And just above that 5.8 spectrum is where the 6 gig band starts. And when you've got something like 60 dB EIRP coming out of a 4-foot 6 gig antenna, you want to keep your drone away from that.
Right. Yeah. And same as any spectrum analyzer. I mean, it's easy. It's a low-level receiver. It's easy to swamp the front end of it, and bad things happen.
We've got a system of pads we put on the front end to keep that from happening.
Yeah, pads and filters, and we really have to qualify the site. If you call and say, hey, can you do this? We are going to invest a lot of time and money that we won't charge you for to see, can we do this successfully, or is it going to be a big smoking hole in the ground when we're done? So it's not a trivial thing to undertake. So,
and not every tower can.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Not every tower can be drone.
Right. So basically, you're not just going to grab a DJ Mavic off of Amazon and just go for a ride type thing.
Not too much. I mean, I encourage people to try this. I mean, everybody should know how to use these tools and experiment with them. Just know that there's a lot of provisions, and take it carefully. Like first time you use an OIB, there's some places you don't want to go with that OIB, or you get a hole in your hand, which we talked about earlier. So it's any tool has its limits and it's dangerous. So guys, give it a whirl. Go into the drone stuff and see what you can do with it. It's great for tower inspections.
One other thing that you guys do, and this is, I forget, is it Bob handles this mostly?
But, yeah, Bob Clinton Sr. We have 2 Bobs.
Yes.
Both Clintons.
And
yep.
So we've got the HD radio calculator on our website, which will let you know what injection levels you can get if you were going HD on your station. Now, realize that what's on the website is, and you see the caveat at the top, I made a point to include it, it's a guideline. Now, you still need, if you're going to go anywhere above minus 14 dBc of injection, you need a consulting engineer to do a proper study. But it does give you a good guide, and we appreciate the tool. One other thing that I use, and I was mentioning I use this a lot just for finding addresses and stuff, but you all maintain the FCCinfo.com.
Right.
Yep. It's a lot of fun. We started as an internal tool, and we said, oh, what the hell, let's put it out there for the public. So once a day we download all the FCC data, AM, FM, TV, and I guess we have microwave stuff, ULS stuff, and
ULS and ASR.
Mm-hmm.
It's all in there, and sometimes you have to dig. And the FCC is always entertaining because they change what the programs do internally, and we don't always catch the data. So somebody gets a 3 a.m. email from the system saying I'm broken again. So it's kind of a labor of love, but it's a neat little tool for looking and drilling down and seeing stuff about stations.
And I mean, also the Google Earth, the KML file is really awesome if you happen to be in an area and want to know what this stick is, so to speak.
Yeah, you can see your stick, you can see the antenna structure registration, you can see the coordinates of your station, and you can see, but my tower's over there. And that might be a hint that maybe you should fix that little data discrepancy. Or if you turn on the microwave links, you can see all the paths of microwave by band in your area. My favorite is to turn on Sutro or turn on the Empire State Building and look at all the microwave beams coming to and from those structures. And yes, Empire does have microwave dishes behind the glass, and they're shooting out the window because that's the only way you can do it with Empire. So it's kind of you can burn a lot of time just screwing around with this tool.
Duncan Fowler says, hopefully this is said often, but thank you for that site and for the Google Earth tool. It's a valuable tool at times.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
Now, the one other thing, and we're way past the top of the hour, and I didn't want to keep you all day, but I saw this photo and it's like, okay, yep, this describes our industry at times. There's a lot of stuff going on these days. MA3, there's LTE interference happening all over, the C-band repack, the TV repack. I know, Cindy, you've done a lot of work with repack in general. Is that pretty much coming to an end now? You got still more to do? How's that coming?
TV band repack is, as far as the FCC is concerned, done. As far as the television stations participating are concerned, there's still a fair amount of cleanup work to do. Not everybody is on their final channel, on their final CP, and there is still a lot of structural work going on. But that is wrapping up. It'll be wrapping up over the next year and a half, and then we'll put that to bed and call it done. The C-band repack is just starting. The auction opens on the 5th of December. Anybody who took the lump sum buyout for the C-band, my most often asked question is, when are we going to get our money? My first answer is, I don't know. My second answer is, I'm guessing it's going to be toward the end of first quarter or early second quarter next year.
So there's still a fair bit to do there. I know I've talked to the folks at Caillou and SAS and there's, or SES, sorry, the satellite folks. There's still a lot of discussion going on there too, isn't there? But overall, the general consensus is there's going to be room.
Yeah, I think there will be room. The problem is, and Cindy, you're the satellite expert. I just speak medium waves, but don't let yourself or your manager back you into a time or a money corner. That money that they got for an upfront payment, it's probably gone, but you still have to buy the equipment, and you and how many thousands of your close friends also want to buy that same equipment, and you need to find somebody to help you if you need to change something, or a dish expert, or somebody who has the right little box to help you aim it. There's a lot of stuff that has to be done per station that took the buyout, and trying to do it at the last moment like that. Nobody in broadcasting ever does anything at the last moment, but in case you are one of those, this is going to screw you. You know, think about it in advance. Cindy, you've probably tried to console people.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to put the filter on, or just purchase the filter and have it, and put the filter on once you've migrated. You know, everybody remembers the mad bug-eyed panic at the last minute when Westwood One changed satellites last year. Broadcasters, nobody wants to be the first, and nobody wants to be the last. And I once had a lawyer tell me that it's not due until it's late.
Yep, that sums up almost everything we do in this industry. On that note, we are 10, 11 minutes past the hour, which, speaking of late, thrown up some sources here. This webinar, as with all of our webinars, will be archived. I assume Ed remembered to hit the record button. He doesn't miss much. We're going to throw Ed's picture up again next week. We did get, we got 1 or 2 successful guesses, but I'll just, we'll reach out to each of you on that one. We got a lot of John Cleeses. That was not John Cleese, folks. So there you go. Now, again, the webinar is archived. We do the Nautel Waves newsletter. Absolutely go to cavellmertz.com to see all the shiny stuff those folks are doing. There's also some really cool bios and meet the team things on your website. So that was kind of interesting. Next week for this session, we're going to have David Layer, the Vice President of Advanced Engineering for NAB, and Tom McGinley. So once again, I get to deal with folks smarter than me, because it makes my job a whole lot easier when I get you folks to come in and tell me how things are rolling. On that note, Gary and Cindy Cavell, I want to thank both of you very much for spending your time with me. It's been a whole lot of fun.
It's a pleasure.
With any luck at all, we'll get to do it again someday.
Cool.
A lot less pressure, you know, this a whole lot easier. But folks, on that note, I want to thank you very much, and we hope to see you next week. Have a great night now.
Goodbye.
Bye.